Well, hi, thank you for coming. My name is Kurt Keeney. I'm a sociology PhD student here, currently a third year, but I also did my master's degree here at UW-Madison in Southeast Asian Studies. So I'm in the weird position where I'm both an alumnus and a current student, meaning that a couple days ago I got a flyer in my mailbox with the grad school asking me to donate money. And I was thinking, whoa, that's not how it works. I'm trying to get money from you guys. I have a dissertation to write. I wanted to come in this direction, not going out yet. So I started my teaching career a long time ago, about 10 years ago. I worked for the Singapore Ministry of Education for about 3 years. I started off teaching in a secondary school, which is essentially 13, 14, and 15-year-old students. And from there, I moved to a second school where I was teaching 17 and 18-year-olds. I have been a TA here for several semesters in sociology. I've taught an introductory American Society course, a survey of sociology course, and I currently teach for the College of Letters and Science, teaching the undergraduate careers course. So it feels like I've spent about 80% of the waking hours of my adult life grading papers, particularly essays, but really a whole array of student work. And so in my current role, in this course that I'm teaching, it's essentially a professionalization course for students, helping them transition from their undergraduate experience in this academic world out into the career world. I wish that I'd had a class like this when I was an undergrad. No one ever taught me how to write a resume, how to write cover letters, what a job interview actually looks like, and that's the kind of work that we do in this course. And I've sort of been asked to walk through what I wanted, what I tried, what happened, and what I do next time. I think I'll try to keep it a little brief on my end. We've got a small group here, and I think this will be a lot more productive if we have conversations about how audio feedback could work in your own contexts. To be honest, I'm still experimenting with this. I'm still feeling out how I feel about it for different kinds of assignments, for different constraints on my end, etc. But I'll walk you through sort of how I stumbled upon this idea of audio feedback and the many ways in which I think it's been a really great process of sort of discovery and has really benefited my pedagogy in a lot of ways. So I first started this when I was marking resumes, and I would find myself sort of spending hours and hours going through students' resumes, writing tiny comments and tiny margins. It was often very sloppy. I was often finding that I would have to sort of draw arrows all over the place. You need to move this up and this down and this thing over and center this. And I was realizing, wow, this is so messy. And I don't really have the space to give a lot of the sort of in-depth comments that I want to give to my students. And I started having a lot of worries too about, are students even understanding what I'm writing here? So what it looks like to me is I've got all these symbols from the GPO style manual, and I know what all of these things mean. Or maybe at best, it's kind of nice common proofreading marks like adding a period or SP for a spelling mistake. And I realized I'm not really sure that a lot of my students even know what these things mean. Particularly international students or students who have had less experience sort of in like language learning spaces and that sort of thing. They may not know that this symbol means new paragraph or something like that.
I like hashtag makespace.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that I knew all of these. And so I think a lot of instructors are a little bit cavalier, sort of making annotations that may or may not be understood by students. Or students may understand it, but they may not know what to do with that. So, who knows how they're reading some of our marks. Yeah, I like the set in italics, set in Italy. And again, I also have a lot of worries about, okay, what it looks like to me is there are a lot of comments here, kind of intuitive, I'm telling you what to do, you should rearrange these paragraphs. And I realize that a lot of students immediately freak out when they see all these marks. The more ink that's on their paper, the worse they did. They often feel very insecure about that. And I was really struggling, how do I give them a lot of feedback without making them feel like they've made a zillion mistakes, right? That many of these are kind of suggestions or whatever. I felt like so much nuance was getting lost. Particularly when I'm marking resumes, I find that half of my comments are hard comments. You need to change this, it's a problem. And I might have 50% of the comments on that resume, they're just sort of suggestions. Personal preference, but maybe you should think about reformatting this. I think it would look a little cleaner. Do what you're comfortable with. And it was very hard for me to distinguish on all my comments, this is something that you have to do, and this is something that, if you want or think about it, consider it. So, I'll come back to these. So, initially I thought about this idea really because of the time concern. I have so many resumes to grade. So I'm curious, from this room, if you're grading something like essays or problem sets or what have you, how much text do you usually leave on the average end of term assignment?
Depends on how much I like the student.
Okay. So a student who you really like, are you leaving like half a page at the end of an essay or something like that? Or what kinds of things, I should ask, what kinds of things are you all grading or interested in perhaps using audio feedback for? Are you mostly looking at essays, science problem sets, math stuff?
Text feedback, I usually, if I really, regardless of whether I like the student or not, or I like the paper that they've done or not,
yeah.
I'll give them feedback on the structure of it and on the, but the details, I usually say, you have errors with, punctuation,
Yeah.
But I don't go through and I don't specify each one of those beyond like the first paragraph.
Yeah.
But probably a paragraph
Yeah.
worth of text is all that I can write, either in ink because my handwriting's not that good and so and margins are too small.
Yeah.
But also even in Google Docs, it's that little side margin that I use comments.
Oh,
in the space.
That can get very loaded.
Right, and then it cuts it off automatically, dot, dot, dot.
And then that
and I
means
know
stop
that
looking at it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I often find if I'm marking essays, for example, I'll put all my commentary in sort of the margins, and then at the end I might put maybe like a quarter or a third of a page of sort of final commentary. In sociology, I do qualitative work, and that involves a lot of interviewing and transcription. Transcription is a total nightmare. It takes forever. Do you have any idea how much? I'll just sort of jump to it. How much do you think you could produce in written text in just 10 minutes of speaking? Multiple pages, right? So I did a little bit of research. The average narrator reads about 9,300 words per hour. If you use the magic of wordstopages.com, which I guarantee you all your undergrads are familiar with, it's not operating my link, so I'll just go to it directly. So I'm sure your undergrads are all familiar with this as they're trying to meet page expectations. So in an hour, I write in Times New Roman. In an hour, your average narrator is reading about 24 pages of text, if that's an audiobook. So if you are talking about just 6 minutes of audio feedback for a student, this is 2.3 pages of single-spaced text that you're producing for them. It's a tremendous amount of volume that you have to work with. It's much, much more efficient than writing out 2.3 pages hand-printed on every single essay that you've got to write. And I did this little experiment with Words to Pages and realized, oh my God, why am I not speaking these comments? That would be so much more powerful. So, let me go back to this. Up here. So in 10 minutes of talking, you're doing about 1,500 words, about 1,000 words in 6 minutes, so anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 pages is the amount of content I'm giving to my students now if I do an essay and I devote 10 minutes to audio. And students have really loved this, so I've pulled just some of my emails from students in reaction to this feedback that I've given. I did this for the first time last November, and I'm currently doing it now, so I don't have the feedback yet from students. But I got a lot of largely unsolicited comments from my students telling me that they really enjoyed the audio files a lot. So this is one from a student. They use a lot of exclamation marks. Your comments on my resume and audio file were super helpful. I was really impressed by how much time you spent on my resume and the quality of your comments, along with the little things that I haven't discovered. Thank you so much! Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And then some other things. So that was from Michelle. This is from another student who I asked, hey, could you tell me what you think about the voice recording? And this student said, I really think that the voice recording is so helpful. I did like the written feedback from both you and Leslie, but to be honest, I think the voice recording was much more helpful. Exclamation, of course.
Was it the written feedback? Was it on the same document?
Yeah. So for these, I have been providing written feedback as well. And my audio, I can sort of walk you through how it works when I do it. I think it's very much a personal choice depending on the kind of feedback that you want to give, the kind of assignment that you've assigned. So that's why I think some discussion would be interesting here to see how people could see themselves using this. But I will typically provide some marginalia, some comments, some lines, and then I essentially walk through the resume and what I've written with additional detail. So, I'm underlining this because I want you to think about changing the verbiage here. So what about these words? And I'll sort of walk through everything that I've written, adding a lot more detail, adding more context. Yeah.
And the other, you may have mentioned this too, but I know when I've used video feedback, it's usually qualitative essays as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like them not only because I can say so much more, but it's also more nuanced. When they hear my voice, they hear whether I'm emphatically and honest about the compliment or if I'm concerned about something.
Yes.
And then I usually pitch it. Actually, I pitched it and called out Active Teaching Labs for You in our Canvas training on Tuesday because it's a great way for accessibility options. You can have the transcript and offer that as another way for someone to get the material that you're providing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I mean, I'll talk about some of the range of benefits that I've seen already or that I perceive already. And I think those are really, really important ones. I was getting other feedback from students saying it was so helpful, I was so impressed. That was just added into an email, totally unsolicited. And I don't know that I had ever sort of gotten unsolicited positive comments from students before about, hey, I loved this grading technique that you used. Usually students aren't emailing us about that kind of thing, so it was really wonderful to get these. This student, tons of exclamation marks. Grace wrote, a lot of really detailed comments here, pointing out, I felt that I got more constructive comments because you pointed out detailed feedback more on the voice recording. And I realized that you gave me more comments on the voice recording, which was really nice. Since you provided feedback from top to bottom, it was very easy to follow. She felt like some comments she couldn't understand in the written feedback, but the voice recording solved those problems. she realized that there were lots of areas to improve, pushed her to revise her resume a lot, and it was very comfortable. It never sounded like criticism, not at all. And that last one in particular was something that was really important to me because, you know, I always worried when a student is giving you a resume of all their life accomplishments and you're just covering it in red ink, it's really hard on the students. You know, it's an assignment that makes them feel very vulnerable in a lot of ways. A lot of them are very insecure about not having enough accomplishments, not being impressive enough. I think it also gets wrapped up in a lot of larger fears they have about their value as a person, their future, how are they going to get a job, how are they going to make a living, how are they going to support the hypothetical family that they're not going to have for another 10 years, but they're already worrying about. And it all gets compounded in writing this resume. And so finding ways to help students overcome that discomfort, I think, is really important. You know, on my end, I think there are a lot of pros, right? There's just a physical toll of grading, right? I didn't flesh out all the things that I wanted to put here. But there's a real physical toll of grading. You know, the wrist pain, the punching over the computer, you gotta do it at a table. It's very exhausting. And I really like the fact that I have a record. Yeah.
So
I didn't flesh this out. These were
prefer
just
audio
lines.
over feedback via tweets
Yes.
based on that second comment, right?
Yeah. Wait, sorry, what?
Over tweets, you prefer the audio over the tweets?
Oh yeah, Lordy, I hope there were, I couldn't resist. It's really nice having the record of feedback, particularly if you're working with students on sort of long-term semester projects, because you can refer back to your own commentary and refresh on the kind of advice that you gave them. So I often found when I was, you know, grading essay assignments that I would mark up their page. Often I had a bunch of pages stapled together, so it's kind of a pain to sort of scan every single page if I wanted to keep a hard record. And then, so I usually would not do that. I would just make my comments, give the paper back to the student, and then next time, you have to remember what your comments were. There can be disputes over, well, I told you that you needed to fix this and make these changes, and you haven't made any of these changes, so that's why your grade has stayed exactly the same. And they'll dispute it and say, oh, you didn't make these changes, and it's very hard unless you have the original document. So I love having the tapes because I can go back to it, I can refresh, I can find parts that I want to reemphasize to students. But there are a lot of challenges in grading the student work, right? It takes forever, again, the physical toll, and there are a lot of doubts. Can my students actually read my handwriting? Are they going to read this? Are they going to know what the heck I'm talking about? Are they going to panic when they see all this red ink? And students get mad sometimes, right? If they feel like they're being attacked, right? That I have put in so many hours of my life and then I give you this paper and you're just shredding it. And you're making all these comments that I don't agree with. I think it's very difficult in written comments, particularly when there are time constraints, to convey enthusiasm, to convey compassion, to convey energy, and all of these things. So, you know, on the student's end, of course, there are lots of concerns. You can't always read it. I'm sure we've all thought these things before when we've been receiving feedback, you know, either as students or on our professional work. So this doesn't just have to be for sort of essay type assignments. If any of you have ever worked on problem sets and you've handed in your sort of mathematical proofs and something is crossed out and you got 14 and it's just crossed out and there's some random numbers there, where's this coming from? How are they pulling this? In an audio file, the instructor can actually say, you're using the wrong value for y here. You need to pull that from question 2. You solved for that. You found that answer. It's 2.84, and so you need to plug that in. You can offer some context and some additional explanation. You know, I think there are also other benefits that we don't often think about a lot, but in doing the audio feedback, your time investment becomes very visible to the student, right? Because they're seeing the effort you put in to the grading in real time, because I mean, there's literally a timer. They're sort of following along, 10 minutes of audio. And I have found that that wins a lot of kudos from students. Students are really, I think, impressed when they realize that papers and assignments don't just magically disappear and then return a week later with a whole bunch of comments. This way they can actually see how much investment and time you're putting into it, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. Students often, I think, don't realize how intensive the grading process is on our end. And of course, it's far more intimate and personal, and importantly, I think students really have to actively engage with this feedback. So when they're listening to my audio file, and they have written comments on their resume, they've got to sort of match up what they're hearing and what's on the page and sort of follow along. And that's a very active process, right? Importantly, they can also pause the audio file and hit pause and sort of catch up if they're making edits, and they can go through it. I've had students who have done this. They say, I'll play your audio tape and I'll just make edits to my resume. And I hit pause, and you say, okay, tighten these sentences here. So they do that. Okay, what's next? And it goes through very chronologically for them. And so it's a way for them to actually engage in your feedback in a very active kind of way. And I think that is very, very valuable. I've heard from lots of other TAs, I just spent a week of my life grading these assignments. I'm not sure they're even going to read these. They just want to see the grade, and that's it. In fact, we know that sometimes students don't read our comments because in the next draft, nothing has changed, right? So by having this sort of active process where you commit to listening to a 15-minute audio tape and following along on your own paper, you are actively engaging with your own feedback. You're doing it in practice. There are some cons here. So this is sort of my last bit. Yeah, it's really awkward talking to yourself. It can be really awkward hearing your own voice. You need a quiet workspace to do this. My office is very loud and sort of frustrating. This is work that I have to do at home. It's work that I have to book a private library room for, or whatever it might be. And honestly, I'm not convinced that it's actually saved me that much time. So I'm still working through this on my own. I think my tendency is still to write too much. What I tend to do is I will sort of take a first pass through the resume. I'll write a few comments here and there. And then I go through and I'll create an audio file. The way I physically do it is there is an audio function in Canvas. After playing with that, I realized I actually prefer my ordinary smartphone. They all have a voice memo function, and that's what I use. It's very easy for me to start and stop. I'm recording right now. I use the timer, which helps me keep on track with my grading a little bit, because I can sort of scale it. If I say, okay, I want to commit 10 minutes per assignment, it sort of keeps me from spilling over. I have a tendency to sort of, I could spend an hour on all of these, and then I realize, okay, this isn't realistic because I need to hand these assignments back on Wednesday. So I follow along with the timer. If I make a mistake, I can always pause, and what I like about using the iPhone is then you can scroll back and you can re-record over your voice. So if I say something that I make a mistake, or I think I sound awkward, or I didn't express it right, I'll just scroll back and re-record over that. It's very easy, and it'll continue it as one continuous audio file. It's also very easy in the app on your phone to hit start and stop. So I can go section by section if I like. If I realize that I need to draw some arrows on the paper to explain what I'm talking about, I just hit pause. And I'll draw the arrow, and I'll say, okay, John, I've just drawn some arrows to show you where I think I should move this box. And I can add some sort of qualitative feedback to them. Now, this is personal choice. I think it would make your resume look a lot cleaner if you moved this, but I've drawn arrows to suggest where that information should go. And I can provide additional detail in that way. I'll give you an example here. So, my original sort of written comments on this one resume, they're scattered, they're all over the place. It's quite messy. This is all supposed to be on this line, and it's sort of like scribbles in the margin. And I was able to link sort of my comments here in my audio tape to other assignments that I wouldn't have referenced, I think, if I didn't have the time or space of the audio file. So in this case, this is a student who's applying for Teach for America. She was writing a bit about her work as a supplementary school teacher at a community organization. And I wanted to make the comment to her, well, you should use more sort of pedagogical instructional language. Teach for America would really love to see that in your teaching you learned sort of the language of teaching, that you really acquired some of these skills. And so my initial comment was, okay, need stronger verbiage, consider pedagogy, assessment, learning objectives, curricula, use teaching vocabulary. And I realized she might not know what that means, right? If I were just to show this to you without giving you any of the context, you'd probably be like, what do you mean? Consider pedagogy, assessment, learning objectives, curricula, how? What does that mean? And so in the audio tape, I made the point of why Teach for America will sort of be looking for this language, why you might consider it, and was able to keep it positive to her. I know you learned, we've had conversations, I know you learned a lot from that teaching experience, and when we talked in person, you were talking a lot about how you had to do syllabus design for the first time. Why don't you include that in this line? I think that would be really great. Those are comments I would not have been able to write in the margins of this resume, and they probably would have done it this way. So that's sort of my rough overview. I'm happy to answer any questions. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, or ways that you all think that you could incorporate audio feedback, or other pedagogy in your feedback and your communications with students.
How do you connect in audio with a particular section of the resume? Do you say in the supplementary school teacher?
Yeah. So when I go through and do it on, say, a resume, and again, that's how I've been doing most of this. It's very easy because I can say, okay, moving on to volunteer experience for this job, and I'll just sort of do it that way. They found it very easy to follow.
So if it were a paper,
Yep.
paper, then what would you do differently? So like, because if it doesn't have an organizational construct to it.
So I've done this also for short documents like cover letters. Some students have sent me cover letters and they got some feedback. And I can turn it around really fast doing an audio file.
Yeah.
So I'll just look at it. Typically what I'll do is I can very quickly run through and just number the paragraphs. So I'll just do a 1 in a circle, 2 in a circle, 3, and I just number the paragraphs. It takes me 5 seconds, and then I can just go through that way. And I can say, overall, these are the things I think. In paragraph 1, I'm noticing this. Now I want you to jump to the last line in paragraph 3. Are you there? Great. And then I'll make whatever my comment might be. I also can give them instructions that are, when I mark the resume, one thing that I ask them to do in many of my audio files is I find that a lot of students will write resumes and they'll leave like all this blank space or something at the bottom. Or they'll have some weird margin on the side and it kind of looks weird for the formatting. And I can give them instructions like, okay, I want you to pick up your resume right now and I want you to hold it at arm's length. Look at all the white space on the right side of that page. You're wasting so much space there, right? And I often make the space, the point to them, think about what percentage of the page you're losing to this white space. If you measure it out, that's probably what? 20% of the page. And I've had a couple students who, like in class, have told me, oh, that was, in your audio file, you told me to hold the resume out, and I did that, and I realized I needed to reformat. They followed my instructions. You listened. So, you know, again, I don't have empirical data on this or anything, but my sense is that they're actually more apt to follow those kinds of instructions because it's your voice telling them to do that. And you can kind of make it an interactive experience. You know, pick up the resume, I want you to hold it out. Or, okay, I want you to jump down to the bottom. I think you're gonna know, you know what I'm about to say, but I think you really need to condense this section, or whatever my comment is. Yeah?
I'm not entirely clear, or maybe I just missed it, on how you're delivering the audio to them and the resume. Is that going back, is the resume going back to them physically and then how are you doing this?
I've done it a couple different ways. I usually will hand the resume back physically. I also often will, sometimes I'll take a photograph and I'll email it. There are a bunch of apps that will turn your document into a PDF file. They're really easy. Dropbox will do it.
And then the audio file?
The audio file is very easy. If I do it from my iPhone, I'll just save it with the student's name. And I'll just save it with the student's name, and there's just a little box here, and it'll plug right to my email.
Okay,
and
so you're emailing them the audio file.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've also transferred these to my computer before, and then I've got like any other file. They're just there in a folder, and I can upload them to Canvas. I can attach them to emails.
Okay. Do you know how the students' preferences are as far as receiving it and working with it?
Well, I don't know that it makes that much difference to them. I think they like email just because they're always checking their email anyway. I have found with assignments that when I give comments via email, I usually get a response.
Oh.
When I do it through Canvas, I'll leave some comments and I don't necessarily, I think they read it, but they won't say, hey, thanks Kurt, or I have a question. So with these, I've actually been trying to email it because I've been wanting to get feedback from some of them, since this is a new experiment. They seem very grateful about it, and that's been a big selling point for me, that the students really appreciate it. It makes them, I think, feel a little bit more likely to reciprocate a little bit. I think they feel a little bit more comfortable, like you care, like you give them time, like this is something they should reciprocate, like you just gave them all of these comments by voice, so the conversation has already kind of started. So it's not a big leap to suddenly approach me after class and continue that conversation because I already spent 10 minutes talking to them about it via the audio file. So
I just heard that, I think James McKay told me this, the number one predictor of student success is feeling that your teacher cares for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's much easier to convey via voice than stuff scratched over there.
yeah, when was this? On Monday, well, it's been a long week. After the Teaching Academy induction, we went down to the terrace and what did they call it?
UClass,
The UClass.
Undergraduate Learning and Sharing Space.
Yes. And so we had some coupons for free ice cream at the terrace, and we went through the very awkward process of trying to round up some undergrads to talk to us about their engagement with TAs and faculty members. And the topic this time, what we were really trying to get at was sort of the TA professor team. Does that seem functional to you? What are your thoughts? What are your perceptions of all of this? And there was one student who was telling us, so he's a freshman, he's been here on campus for almost 2 full semesters now. And he was telling John Zumbrunnan, he said, you're the first faculty member that I've ever interacted with. He's been on this campus since September. Really nice kid, really friendly, very engaged, he was happy to talk with us, and he had never interacted with a faculty member. And particularly at a large university like this, I think it's really important for us to close that gap. There are a lot of students here who I suspect kind of get lost in the wilderness, because unless they're really proactive about seeking out their TAs, seeking out faculty members, they can just sort of show up to lecture and leave lecture and never have those kinds of engagements. I think particularly for first generation college students, it can be very daunting to establish those relationships with faculty members. And I do think that getting a personalized audio file, almost like a voicemail that you are leaving about their work, does a lot to bridge that gap. You're addressing them by name, that you're saying your name. Again, it's sort of like you've already started the conversation.
Well, they started with the paper, and you're
Yeah.
engaging in that dialogue, you're continuing that dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting emails like this was really pretty moving, right? And especially this one, like I loved getting this. It was really cool. I've never gotten an email and it was like, yeah, my awesome feedback, and it made my whole week. But it was really exciting to get comments like this from students.
I love this, of course, but there's two technical things I was just going to throw out when you ask how you record things.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of said it. You can use a rich content editor, even within SpeedGrader, to record audio comments like this.
Yep.
The negative of that is that you can't export them from Canvas, so they always live there within that course. So that's kind of the downside of it. But the other idea is you can use Kaltura as essentially supporting tool, so you always get our help.
Yep.
You can use Capture Space Lite, record
Yep.
from whatever, just your audio, you don't have to do a desktop. And then it automatically uploads to Kaltura. You can embed those into Canvas or SpeedGrader, and it doesn't take up any storage. And so you get the benefit of no storage on your personal device, but you always have access to it online or anywhere in Kaltura, and it's centrally supported.
And you can use the highlighting to point out to the
Exactly.
different
Yeah.
areas and.
Right, so you could use Capture Space to do a desktop recording of the document and audio, so you can
that's
get
great.
feedback while you're highlighting things, and then it's automatically uploaded. You have it all stored in your own Kaltura space.
That's amazing.
Yeah, have you tried to do an online,
I have.
grading the documents in Canvas and SpeedGrader?
I fiddled with it briefly, and I realized I really just like using my phone. I mean, I
Those
record a lot.
handwritten notes versus the highlighting and part of the text.
Right, those annotations. Not too much. I mean, I really liked the idea, honestly, of sort of sitting on my sofa, writing a few comments. I have done lots of interviewing and stuff using the, in a pinch, using the voice memos on my phone. And so it was great. I've got like this little, everyone should have one of these. It's like a little desk that you can put on your lap. So you can kind of like recline on the sofa. I can write a little bit. And then I just have my phone in my pocket, and I realized, I use this all the time for files. I can sync it with my computer. I can have it on my desktop. I can move stuff into Box, and it won't take up the storage space. I can send an email. I can access it in a student conference if I need to go back and refresh on what I said in them before. I found the technical part a really low barrier to entry, actually. I played around a little, but I realized, this is the least of my concerns, is the tech part. It's actually really pretty clean.
Well, you don't need go ahead.
I want
But I
to
love
more
this
things to
Kaltura
build
idea.
off of your ideas.
Yeah.
If you were to keep Google Docs open with the voice typing at the same time that you're leaving the feedback, you've got a written record there that you can scan later on as well, that would be connected with all of your grading for whatever the session is. The idea of using Kaltura, I was thinking, we're so close to the audio, it'd be very easy to just get a video camera, a phone on a little flexible thing, $15. Now you could have if you prefer the handwritten paper thing, you could point, do the pencil tapping in this paragraph, and you got the audio and the video there, upload it to Kaltura, you're set that way as well. But yeah, the online is great.
No, those are great suggestions. The one benefit is, you wouldn't have to go through the process of converting it to a PDF. So it'd be all in one way, whether you do the video or you just do a screen capture of the submission. But the other nice part is, I do a lot with my phone. I'm recording too, if I'm playing music or I'm walking and I have an idea. But then I've also had the problem where I either change phones or I have to reformat it for whatever reason, and then I lose all of that. And I've lost a lot because of that. So Yeah, and I know, there's other ways to do it, but the app I use that I like, I lost
Yeah.
a bunch. It's just an idea that this is one way you
No,
always have access, whether it's on your phone or a lab computer or
Yeah.
a work computer, you can always get them.
That's pretty fantastic.
The capture space tool is a screen capture?
Yeah, and it's free, it's
Yeah.
supported by our WW too.
I will definitely-
It's built in, it's not built into Canvas, you download it separately and you just open it as an app. And then you choose whether you want it to be audio, video,
Right.
screen capture, the whole screen or the size of it. It's
Yeah.
very simple. It's,
Okay.
and then it automatically loads into your account.
Wow, that's great.
Using your net ID.
Yeah, my advice to people would be, don't worry about the technology to start. Really see if you're comfortable with the style of giving feedback. And then there are lots of ways to do the technology. I mean, I'm pretty sold now on doing this audio feedback going forward. I think lots of different kinds of assignments. And so, I mean, I'm ready to take the plunge too. And I think I'm going to explore that technology because that would be great.
Well, if you want help with it, there are videos already out there that you could, do your target training or something, but feel free to email us at, WW.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. I'm gonna play with that. I had another thought about that. Yeah, and of course I think there are different, once you've sort of played around with audio and you figured out how you want to adapt it for your own teaching, I can imagine that for some instructors doing sort of little video captures would be a really great extension of this, right? Perhaps if you are doing more, if your instruction is more on sort of technical or hands-on things, and you demonstrate a lab procedure and show them the right way to do it, and you use that as your audio feedback on some sort of science project or something like that. So, I mean, there are tons of different implications or ways that people could use these.
So just quick, I guess, poll of sorts. What do you all think would be like the biggest barrier to doing this?
If your voice went out.
Well, yeah.
If you lost your voice, scratching
Yeah,
your throat,
talking.
coughing,
Anyone else?
I think the big thing for me is knowing any accessibility needs of my students to be sure that those who can't handle the audio
Mhm.
for whatever reason are still getting my feedback, just kind of really thinking through making sure I'm reaching all of my students.
That was your idea with using like a Google Doc that's open and having audio.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
when we
For me, the
started.
biggest thing is that hearing my own voice and all of the stuttering that I do and all of the ums and the ahs and like, when I talk, I don't keep track of that, but if it's documented, then all of a sudden I go back and I'm like, oh, terrible, rewind, recut, it would feel very, it's natural, we understand that, but when I listen to it myself, it feels very awful. I think, but I'm wondering if that's changing. If we're getting more used to the idea of video recording ourselves and audio recording ourselves, and I wonder if that's changing. And so there's more of an opportunity for this to happen.
Not for you, but for,
Well, even for me,
Yeah, that's close, yeah.
Well, that's when you're talking about like connecting with people on this sort of like, appropriate intimate level of caring about them, then, being vulnerable and trying to correct something into this element of perfection,
Yeah.
but then also like speaking where you have vocal fillers and stutters and you're really imperfect, that kind of vulnerability as a teacher is what people will respond
Yeah.
positively to.
And for the record, I don't have to hear my own voice very often. It's most of the students who are going to hear that. And I think they're very forgiving. I mean, I did joke with them. I'm so sorry for. I went into a little room and I just talked at my phone for you guys. It was super awkward. So please be nice to me if I'm stammering or stuttering. I will occasionally hit pause and go back because I realized I did a really long pause while I was gathering my thoughts, and that was awkward, so I'll scroll back a little and just re-record. But they've been they were really receptive.
audio quality is okay.
Yeah, the audio quality seems just fine. And I did think about the accessibility component too, and of course that's always important to think about. in a way, I have been thinking that perhaps audio is more accessible for a lot of students. You know, I don't have the greatest handwriting in the world, and whether we like it or not, there's sort of a tendency to sort of revert to your natural handwriting, and so mine will wind up, I try to print my comments, but I'll start reverting sort of into cursive or sort of these half cursive shorthands. And I think for students who are not as comfortable, you know, they don't learn cursive anymore yet. So some of them can't read cursive. I think for students who are non-native English language learners, when you have funny looking characters that you're throwing together with your cursive, that can be really challenging for them. Of course, we have a lot of students who have dyslexia and other sorts of concerns around that sort of thing. So I think actually the audio winds up being perhaps a way to get around some of those issues. Of course, you need to know your class, right?
Any other thoughts, ideas?
I think within Canvas, it can be challenging for students to find the feedback on assignments. I'm working on a student-facing KP doc actually that helps address some of that, but I'm realizing that it doesn't address how to find audio feedback.
Yeah.
When you do that, can you make
Even-
that KV doc into a Canvas page that faculty can then just take that and say, here's a disclaimer about finding feedback. And that way they don't have to rewrite it.
That's good.
Even the written comments, the beginning of the semester, my students had no clue where to find it. It's like, well, you know, you have to go back to your assignment first, but then there's some clicking you have to do to get to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make an embedded Google Doc and give you the iframe code and paste in your
Talk my language.
Do you go through all of the notes that you have written by hand in your audio? So if they had a spelling mistake or
Yeah, so
a
usually
formatting issue.
with sort of grammatical things or minor adding commas, I won't say, okay, put a comma here to add a comma. I would like to get to a point where my written stuff is all of, you know, correcting punctuation or correcting spelling here and there, and that I'm really limiting my sort of substantive written comments and putting all of that into the audio. I think that would make me a lot more efficient. It's a process. I think you have to practice a little because my tendency is to try to write everything and then record. So I've recently switched to, rather than doing written comments and then recording an audio file, I'll go kind of section by section for the most part. And that keeps me, I think, a little bit more aware of how much I'm writing versus recording, and it keeps me a little more efficient, if that makes sense. So I'll often, it's kind of nice because you sort of learn patterns of once you do it a little bit and ways that you like to start, and you're able to use even phrases that you want to repeat to students. So I typically start off, at least with this round of resumes that I'm grading, where I'll say, you know, hi John, Kurt here. I've got your resume in front of me. I've just made some comments and I want to walk you through the comments. So first, hold up your resume at arm's length or whatever I want them to do. And I'll say, okay, let's jump to the education section. You'll see here, and you know, it winds up being really sort of flowy. I think there's a good hook there because once they hit play on the audio file, we want to hear what comes next, right? I think that's very natural. So I hope that they're sort of following it through to the end. My impression is that they have been doing that.
Quick question.
Okay, sure.
Do you find that your students start sort of incorporating your the class vocabulary more when they hear you using it more, or do you think it has an effect, or do they take on your mannerisms when they? I don't know.
That imitation or mimicking, yes.
I don't know. I can't say because these resumes we typically build up to over the course of the semester, and those have been more towards the end. I don't know.
If you do that through a semester, it's guaranteed that most of them would pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially for some, like I teach Spanish, so I would do all of this in Spanish. By the end, they're gonna sound like me saying the things I say because they don't have a lot of
Everybody just walks out of class sounding exactly like.
He's right, yeah, that's great, and I love that.
We are out of time, so I want to respect everybody's opportunity to leave. Please help me thank Kurt for coming and sharing. And then just a reminder on your way out, if you could fill out our little survey evaluation. Maybe Kurt, you can stick around for a few more minutes to answer any other questions that people have.
Can I see an audio version of this?
You can send